I pointed my flashlight to the left. The light didn't reach the wall. It was too far away. But I was comforted to see absolutely nothing there. I breathed deeply for a couple more seconds before I heard another noise in the darkness. It was very quick, and I can't be sure that it wasn't my own body moving around without me noticing, but I thought I heard a scraping sound, not 10 feet in front of me. It sounded like the noise your feet make when you're walking across a dirt-covered floor. Before I could react, I heard the breathing to my left again, closer this time. There was no way this was real. I hadn't seen so much as a spiderweb in this building, and now I was convincing myself that something was next to me breathing? I was angry at myself for getting so worked up. I told myself that the human brain is constantly hallucinating. I told myself that while in silence or darkness, the brain will make sounds to fill the gap, or make you think you see things that aren't there. I channeled my inner skeptic in order to calm myself. It worked. It worked until I saw a flash of something in front of me. I can't be entirely sure what it was, but I heard the accompanying sound of feet scraping against the floor, and I began to swell with dread. I decided that the best course of action at this point was to turn off my flashlight, assuming that they couldn't see me. They couldn't get me. Whatever they might be. I turned off my flashlight and was left in complete and total darkness. The bulb of the flashlight faded as it cooled, and I put it in my pocket, simultaneously pushing back against the cold cement wall in an attempt to stand. I managed to get up to my feet, foot, and found I couldn't stand to put any pressure on my injured knee. I limped to the corner, humming to myself, trying to break the deafening silence. I called for Steve! As loud as I could, but heard no response. He was probably back in the car, still hunting for that rope. There had to be a ladder or something, somewhere. I continued to hum, and my heartbeat, which had been beating almost out of my chest, slowed to a manageable rate. I moved along the cement wall, keeping my whole body against it, the weight off my injured knee. I had traveled what I guessed to be about 10 feet when my head made contact with something in front of me. I tumbled to the ground. My concussion must have amplified the pain because it was blinding. I reached both my hands to my forehead when I felt something warm and wet with my fingers. I searched for a cut anywhere on my forehead but couldn't find one. I desperately searched for my flashlight and I sat up, tried to get back up against the wall. I grabbed the light in my right hand, braced myself against the wall with the other. I turned it on and pointed it into the darkness where I was lying. The floor was wet, but the dirt had muddled the color of whatever the liquid was. I tried to get my eyes to focus on the puddle, tried to convince myself that it was my blood. When I saw another drop fall into the puddle. Words lack the ability to describe the way that I felt when I heard the drip noise again. And I saw yet another tiny ball of liquid fall into the puddle. I think I knew, even then, exactly what the source was. But I was endlessly trying to convince myself that I was wrong. I lifted the flashlight up and pointed it at the source of the liquid. What stared back at me was a pipe that protruded at least a foot out from the cement wall. The metal was rusted and cracked. Little bits of liquid began to seep from them. At the end of the pipe was a simple shower head aimed down towards the ground. You know that feeling when your stomach drops? In this case, I think mine literally did because I vomited immediately. It got all over my shoe, but that wasn't the least bit important at the time. I ignored the pain in my knee and shuffled along the wall as fast as I possibly could. I heard noises, but I couldn't be sure if it was just the sounds of my own movement or something around me. I managed to duck under the next shower head. This one was higher up on the wall and seemed to be leaking the same liquid that the other one was. I felt like I was moving along something infinite. Every now and then I would have to duck or move under another metal bar, another shower head. They began to pour more profusely, but the liquid was too thick to come out easily. The room began to smell. And I remembered immediately the way that Mr. Mays had described it. I grabbed my shirt and pulled it over my nose, trucking onward, but it didn't stop the smell for an instant. It smelled like vomit. It smelled like shit. It smelled like burnt hair. It smelled like rot. I was still moving against the wall when I fell into some sort of outlet. I hit the dirt ground hard, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and the pain still managed to break through, though. My flashlight was still in my hand, and I aimed it and examined my surroundings. Sitting in front of me was a doorway. There was a door there, though it looked aged now. It had a nice little design on it, a doorknob, and a knocker that looked like a snarling demon. The red paint was peeling from it, flaking off and falling to the ground in front of me, and I clumsily rose and burst through the door, narrowly missing a piece of hanging sheet metal in front of me. I was crawling now. There was no way that I could run. The walls and ceiling were lined with metal, the kind that you would see on the roof of a farm. Large pieces of wood seemed to be bracing the sheets, holding the makeshift tunnel together. I couldn't risk sliding along against that and possibly cutting myself on it or hitting the wood and causing a cave-in, so I crawled. I pulled myself for what felt like miles, running into walls every now and then because the path seemed to curve like a snake. I had no idea where I was in relation to the hole that I'd fallen through, but I told myself that there was an exit at the end of this. Had I not been crawling, I would have surely hurt myself far worse, as there are parts of the tunnel in which the ceiling dipped down to maybe 3 feet above the ground. It hadn't caved in because the ceiling still lined it. Someone had built it like this. This, again, is in hindsight. I didn't care at the time. I kept telling myself that there was nothing behind me. But I swore that I heard feet scraping only a few inches behind my own. My jeans would brush against my leg every now and then, making it feel like someone was touching me. And even now, I still can't completely convince myself that someone wasn't. I crawled and crawled until I reached an upslope. With joy, I looked ahead of me. There was a cellar door. The door was made of wood, and I knew this because I could see light through them. I couldn't be sure, but I thought it might have been the light from the car's headlights. Besides all of that, I was just so immensely happy to find an exit. I crawled all the way to the door, threw my shoulders into it. It budged, but didn't open. I began to scream, but my throat seared with pain. The most that I could manage was a harsh cry noise. It sounded like a dying animal. I collapsed in exhaustion and pain, my eyes staring up at the slits of light before me. I was so close to being out of here. I could taste it. It was in that moment of silent defeat that I heard a noise that was, without question, something moving in the tunnel. It sounded like something being dragged across the floor. It would move, pause for a second, then move again. I had nothing left in my stomach to throw up. I began to gag. I gathered myself slightly and tried to steady my hand enough to focus the flashlight into the tunnel. What I saw I can still not rationalize. I know what I saw, but I can't convince myself that it was actually there. I can't stop telling myself, whatever that was, that I was hallucinating. I saw a child in a dirty sleeping gown. The gown was stained with something dark and brown, with occasional splotches. With occasional splashes of deep red. The child was extremely frail, like the pictures that people might see of Holocaust victims. I could only make out one eye, brightly reflecting the light of my flashlight. In between huge tufts of long, dirty hair, it reached down beyond the fingertips of the child, which were caked with dirt. The boy, the girl, I'm not entirely sure which, moved towards me with difficulty. It wasn't breathing hard, but it seemed that every movement of every muscle took every ounce of strength that the child had. The thing that froze me, though, was the eye. It was only visible because it was reflecting my flashlight, but even in that glint, I could see anger, deep hatred, something like it. This is the point in which the English language really lacks the right words to explain the situation. I could tell that this child meant me harm. Whether it was a hallucination or not, the thing was getting closer. I started to cry. It was getting closer and closer when I heard a voice from behind me. "Hey, Jack," whispered the voice. It was Steve. I was certain. I tried to talk back, fully intending to say, "Open this up! Get me out of here right now!" However, given my current state, I'm sure it just sounded like garbled nonsense. I clawed at the door, pushing against it with everything that I had, and finally, breaking eye contact with the child. As I did this, the flashlight rolled down the slope, coming to rest near the child's feet. "What do you see?" the voice asked. "What are you talking about?" I closed my eyes. I remember hearing a reply along the lines of, "Just look at it. Tell me what you see." But my own screams of frustration drowned it out. I was mumbling like a maniac when the voice told me, "Certainly. Rest for a second. I'll get it." The statement took a second to settle in, at which point I closed my eyes tight. Steve Steve, just do it, please, please, just get it open, please. I whimpered, just get me out of here. My voice was beginning to get louder. Steve, god damn it, open the fucking wooden door! I opened my eyes for a split second to see nothing but black hair dangling in front of my face, a small glint of light, hidden in the mess of tangles. I slammed my eyes shut and screamed, with every ounce of energy that I had, open the fucking... The door behind me gave way, and I fell onto the dirt. Taking in a breath of fresh air, my eyes were still closed, but the first thing that I did was scramble to find the cellar door and close it. And once I had done that, I took a deep breath and opened my eyes. I saw the barn in front of me, illuminated by the headlights of the car. My head was pulsing with pain. I was covered in dirt and liquid that I didn't even care to know what the origins of. My knee was, at the very best, dislocated, but despite all of that, I was out of the tunnel. I took a deep breath, buried my head in my hands, and said, Steve, why didn't you just fucking open the door? I waited for a response, but none came. Steve, seriously, I began. I was fucking clawing and screaming for my life. I said as I looked behind me, and my stomach must have been on the verge of falling out of me at this point because it shifted again. The only thing behind me was a large mass of bushes that I had seen while examining the perimeter of the building. I was angry. Steve, this is not the fucking time. Come out of the fucking bushes. I was getting ready to stand up when I heard a yell from the front of the building. A flashlight bobbed up and down in the semi-darkness. Steve. Steve was running into the open door of the structure, yelling my name and telling me not to worry. I must have lost consciousness at that point. When I woke up, Steve was standing over me, desperately trying to wake me up. His words were almost incoherent, at least to my ears. He helped me to my feet and began to walk me to the car. As we walked along, I saw my flashlight sitting just outside the cellar door. The light was fading. Steve brought me back to the car and then drove me to the nearest hospital. I fell asleep, but he told me that he drove me around for an hour before he found the main road. I don't think I ever told him the whole story. I believe he thinks that I was just injured from the fall. He never really asked about it. We didn't stay in contact for much longer. It's not like we deliberately parted ways. We just sort of stopped hanging out after the trip. We went our separate ways. I've never been able to fully understand what happened that night. There's so many things that I can explain away as hallucinations, but there's still many things that don't make sense. The shower heads were there, and they were leaking something, and the door was real, the tunnel was real. Most everything else that I can semi-rationalize, if I can convince myself that I had a very bad concussion, a very, very bad concussion. But the one thing that I couldn't have imagined was that that cellar door was locked. And then it suddenly wasn't. I mean, I'm still as skeptical as I've ever been, but I believe in what happened to me at the showers. I'm not a hermit or like a social retard because of this. I mean, I drink a lot, but I'm still functional. But I'll never return to Nebraska. No one will ever be able to convince me otherwise. I don't watch horror movies either. This is absolutely nothing entertaining about being so desperately scared. And that's it, really. And there's no typical ending for my story. I was changed by my experience, yeah, but there's no way to change anything about it. Or fight back against it. I can't even convince myself that I wasn't just seeing things. I mean, believe me, I've been trying for years. Prior to this, there was really no way to find any information on the showers. The legend didn't extend outside the classroom of Mr. Mays. No one told stories like this to keep children away from certain places or to scare them. It just wasn't known. And I guess that's really the point of this whole story. I want people to know firsthand what this place is. Maybe it's a drunk's rationale, or the kid inside of me wanting to spread these kinds of stories again. I don't know. I don't care. But it's out there now, for people to mold and warp to their needs. Most importantly, it's finally out of my head. It's getting late. And I'm gonna get another drink. Cheers.